You are now listening to the story, history podcast for sleep-forgotten cheeses of the Mongol Empire. Hey guys, tonight we saddle up for a journey across the open plains of Central Asia, where the wind never stops, the yurts flap like sails, and your travel snacks might just bite back. You're riding with the Mongol Empire, not quite the tourist package you imagined. But let's be honest, cheese making here isn't quaint. It's survival, it's chemistry, it's chunky. Picture this, you're bouncing on a sturdy little Mongol pony, your back already regretting it, and strapped to the saddle is a goatskin bag of airag fermented mare's milk, sloshing, warming, jiggling with every hoofbeat. You're told this is both a beverage and a digestive aid, which seems optimistic, considering it smells like pickled lawnmower. You wonder if it's really meant to be stored like this, or if this is one of those ancient traditions born entirely by accident. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, post where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing where my sleepy little history club is tuning in from now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You notice something strange over the days you ride. That sloshing bag of airag, it gets thicker. Lumps start to form. It smells a bit cheesier. You wouldn't eat it on a dare, but the local herders do. They slice off a puck of the now curdled contents. Let it dry in the sun until it turns into something between chalk and jerky, and pop it in their mouths like it's trail mix. Welcome to the accidental cheese factory of the Mongol steppe. Number 5. Cows. No rennet, no sterile milk thermometers. Just physics, time, and an alarming tolerance for sour things. Historians still argue whether these early curds were intended to be cheese, or just a byproduct of milk preservation gone slightly sideways. But either way, the Mongols found them useful, dense, portable, and immune to time, temperature, or common sense. This proto-cheese wasn't just a snack, it was nutrition insurance. You couldn't exactly carry roast lamb across the Gobi, but a pouch of sun-dried curd that could last weeks, even months. It wouldn't melt, rot, or attract flies. If it got moldy, you just cut off the green bits and kept chewing. You don't survive a 1,000-mile ride from Karakorum to Kiev by being picky. There's even a trick Mongol riders used. They'd tie the curd lump to the inside of the saddle flap, where body heat would soften it slightly throughout the day. By dinner, it was warm, vaguely spreadable, and if you closed your eyes and imagined hard enough, maybe even creamy, you give it a go. You instantly regret giving it a go. You pass a kid on horseback, knowing a dried cheese pebble the size of a plum pit. His teeth are perfect. Yours are reconsidering their life choices. The Mongols didn't write cookbooks, but their oral traditions describe dozens of fermented milk products, some soft and tangy, others so hard they were used as makeshift dice, or sling bullets. One of these early cheeses, possibly kurud, is mentioned in fragmented Chinese court records, described as a sour pebble unfit for imperial mouths. This review did not make the packaging. But here's the kicker. It worked. The Mongol Empire didn't thrive on feast foods. They thrived on functional foods, fermented, portable, and often born from accidents. You wonder if this was true innovation, or simply a matter of necessity. Did some steppe genius figure out how to curdle a milk product on purpose? Or was it just a series of happy microbial accidents, embraced by riders too busy to argue with protein? Even now, in some rural parts of Mongolia, you'll find elders still using the same methods. A goatskin bag, tied to the side of a ger, filled with milk and trust. The curds are pressed between stones, or left to dry on the roof. Kids play nearby, occasionally stealing a piece when they think no one's watching, though no one seems too bothered. If you can chew it, you've earned it. It's a quiet reminder that while cheese might conjure visions of European caves and aging wheels, It also thrived in the wind-blown loneliness of the steppes, without fancy cellars, without brine baths, just fermented determination. As you drift into sleep, the hoofbeats of the steppe slow into a rhythmic lull. That goatskin bag hangs beside you, sloshing quietly. Inside, something ancient is happening: milk becoming memory, curd becoming culture, and your stomach? Well, it's just along for the ride. You duck into a Mongol gur, just as the wind starts to screech across the plains. The felt flap falls closed behind you, muting the world outside. Inside, it's smoky and warm, like someone tried to roast a sheep inside a sock. You blink through the haze and see an old woman tending to something bubbling in a shallow stone pot. You're not sure if it's dinner, medicine, or revenge. This is the Empire's kitchen, not a marble-floored banquet hall, not a French countryside creamery, but a round tent, a wood-burning stove, and a half-dozen containers with ambiguous dairy contents. And here's where the culinary mystery deepens. Mongol cheese wasn't really one thing. It was many things. Some soft, some brittle, some that defied categorization and possibly health codes. You crouch beside the fire as the old woman stirs something white and sticky. She says, it's made from sheep's milk, filtered through a cloth that smells faintly of horse. You ask what it's called? She shrugs. She says, Sagan edges white stuff. Comforting. Historians still argue whether these vague, dairy lumps were truly cheese in the European sense, or just milk products with ambition. The Mongols didn't use rennet the way Europeans did. Instead, they let bacteria and time do the work, often with a helping hand from stomach heat and a lot of shaking. Sometimes, the resulting product was biaslag, a soft, spreadable cheese, eaten fresh. Other times it became Orwell, version you met earlier, and occasionally, they'd stumble into a texture, somewhere in between stretchy, squeaky, oddly elastic. You try not to think about the parallels to gym mats. In the corner, a younger herder is pressing curds into a wooden mold carved with swirling patterns. Not for art, but for airflow. These weren't cheeses meant to age for years in cool caves. They were dried fast, often within days, on rooftops, or strung like socks above the cooking fire. A kind of food dehydration on fast forward, and yet, in their own chaotic way, they worked. The empire didn't just survive, they expanded, across frozen Siberia, blistering deserts, dense forests, and even into the cities of the Middle East and Eastern Europe, all on horseback, all with questionable lactose tolerance. There's a popular myth repeated with a kind of proud horror that Genghis Khan once fueled his cavalry entirely on meat, blood, and fermented dairy. It's not quite true, but not entirely false either. The diet was shockingly efficient. Protein, fat, some vitamins, and enough microbes to terrify a modern probiotic label. You reach for a small pot sitting near the fire. It's filled with something called grim-clotted cream that's been lightly soured and salted. You dip your finger in. It's sweet, buttery, with a slightly tangy punch at the end. You're told it's eaten with bread, but there's no bread around, so it's served with more cheese. Outside, someone calls for the cook. A small feast is being prepared for a visiting warrior. A sheep is brought in, not the whole thing, just the edible bits. The good bits are boiled. The lesser bits are fermented. The worst bits are not discussed. One bowl contains a curious mix: shredded curd, dried wild onions, and what looks like clarified butter. You squint. It smells like regret, but the warrior slurps it happily. He says it gives strength. You nod like someone who believes in things they don't understand. Nearby, a goat snorts and relieves itself near the drying rack. No one moves. The cheeses remain unbothered. The logic is simple. If it's dry enough to survive goat pee, it's dry enough for war. There's even some evidence, still debated by scholars, that Mongol military leaders experimented with cheese, balls soaked in horse blood, possibly as a form of battlefield ration. Nutritional? Absolutely. Appetizing? Less so. Some modern historians think this was exaggerated by terrified European observers, eager to paint the Mongols as culinary barbarians. Others think it sounds suspiciously like modern protein balls, if they were made by Satan. But you're starting to see the deeper pattern here. These weren't accidents anymore. This was tradition. Iterative, passed down through smoky tents, and at the center of it all was a practical, unsentimental philosophy. Don't waste the milk, ever. As the sun sets outside, the wind howls like a lost flute. The cheese rack sways gently, little curd nuggets spinning on their strings. The smoke thickens. The old woman fans the fire with a carved wooden paddle, muttering something about the curds needing to sweat. You close your eyes for a moment. The heat, the temps, the slow churn of milk into sustenance, hypnotic somewhere between the sour smell and the soft clinking of drying curds. You realize something. This wasn't just about food. It was a form of control, of memory, of turning something perishable into permanence. And maybe, in some corner of this swirling empire, someone did find joy in the craft. A little extra cream here, a lucky batch of curds there, a texture that surprised even the oldest grandmother. But of course, no one would ever admit that. You're riding again, this time with purpose. Not just as a milk hauler or cheese taste tester, but as a courier. And no, it's not scrolls or weapons in your saddlebag. It's cheese. Very specific, very firm, questionably edible Mongol cheese. You're part of the Khan's diplomatic envoy, and that means delivering both messages and snacks. But in the Mongol world, snacks are statements. You're handed a small pouch of hardened aruel, tied with goat sinew, and slightly warm from its journey, inside someone's tunic. The pouch bears a carved seal, meaning this cheese isn't just for chewing. It's official business. You ride across hills and rivers, through windy passes, where even the goats seem grumpy. At each checkpoint, guards nod solemnly when you show the cheese. One even smells it before waving you through. You're told that the Khan's own envoy never travels without fermented dairy, and that refusing cheese at a diplomatic table is basically a declaration of war. Historians still argue whether Mongol cheese had true ceremonial value or was simply what they had on hand. But there are recorded instances, particularly in Persia and Eastern Europe, where emissaries described being handed small, wax-wrapped parcels of curd as tokens of goodwill. A dairy handshake, if you will. It's not hard to understand why. Cheese was compact, long-lasting, and if someone tried to poison it, the flavor was already suspicious enough to hide most tampering. Smart, right? You finally reach your destination, a stone-walled outpost, manned by a nervous collection of soldiers and scribes. They're expecting a letter. You hand them the pouch of cheese. There's a moment of confusion. One young scribe sniffs it, grimaces, and opens it with exaggerated delicacy. Inside, nestled between two curd wedges, is a note written on lambskin vellum. It's legible, even fragrant. The outpost commander, a Turkic noble who's clearly had his share of weird encounters with Mongols, mutters something about cheese, post, and then bows, accepting the delivery with all the solemnity of a peace treaty. The cheese is passed around and nibbled. Most of it disappears into pockets. Later, you're invited to a small diplomatic feast. You notice one table displaying local delicacies, saffron rice, roasted meats, plums. But at the center, carefully unwrapped on a silver dish, is your pouch of Mongol cheese. It's not served, it just sits there, like a holy object no one dares touch. You wonder if it's revered or feared. As the meal begins, there's a tense but polite exchange of gifts. The Mongol ambassador offers fermented camel milk. The host returns with preserved dates and spiced almonds. Then, the cheese is sliced ceremonially by the oldest guest at the table. He chews thoughtfully. Everyone watches. He swallows and nods. Apparently, that's enough to avert war. you begin to understand the deeper cultural resonance. In Mongol society, sharing food, especially something that took time, technique, and tolerance, was more than sustenance. It was vulnerability. Offering someone your cheese meant offering them your microbes, your animals, your seasons. A fermented trust fall. It's not so different from Europeans gifting wine or Japanese exchanging rice cakes. But with the Mongols, cheese was portable diplomacy. They might have ridden thousands of miles, burning cities and flattening kingdoms, but they still brought snacks. There are even rumors, half legend, half documented, that Genghis Khan himself once sealed an alliance with a Persian emir by offering him a pouch of aged mare's milk cheese, hardened from months of travel. The emir, deeply allergic to dairy, reportedly accepted it anyway, and later built a shrine to his stomach lining. Outside the feast hall, you sit on a blanket under a starlit sky. One of the guards from the outpost joins you, unwrapping his own private stash of kurud, a crumbly cheese that smells strongly of hay and regret. He offers you a bite. You accept. It crumbles like chalk but tastes oddly floral. He says it was made by his grandmother, that she adds wild herbs no one else uses, that it's good for the heart. You nod, chewing carefully. It might not be gourmet, but it is identity. Across the empire, Mongol communities developed distinct cheese customs. Some preferred sheep's milk, others favored goats. Some dried theirs on flat stones, others strung it between trees. Recipes weren't written, but tastes were remembered. Each region's cheese told a story of climate, of herds, of which grandma had the best scowl. While curdling, you tuck away your last curd nugget and stretch under the sky, your mind still turning over the odd idea that cheese could be a kind of letter, a message with temps and texture, a preserved piece of someone's homeland, handed across languages and borders. And when you finally drift off to sleep beneath the stars, your dreams are soft, pale, and quietly soured, just like the cheese tucked in your satchel. The moon is up, the air is thin, and your jaw is sore. You've been gnawing on a piece of arowell for what feels like an hour. It hasn't gotten smaller. If anything, it's gaining strength. This is not a cheese for the faint of teeth. Arowell is perhaps the most infamous of the Mongol dairy creations, a sun-dried curd snack that doubles as a dental endurance test. It's small, portable, and vaguely resembles a chalky lozenge crossed with a prehistoric fossil. The Mongols loved it. You, less so, but here you are, sitting cross-legged outside a tent near the Altai Mountains, chewing your way through the Mongol equivalent of trail mix. Around you, other riders do the same, chomping with the casual confidence of people whose molars were forged in the fires of nomadic necessity. One grins at you mid-chew, revealing a perfect row of teeth that seem to be made of granite. You smile back with your mouth closed. Historians still argue whether arewol qualifies as cheese in the European sense, or if it's something entirely different. Dehydrated yogurt, curd, perhaps, or an edible rock, blessed by dairy spirits. It starts as fermented milk, separated into curds and whey, and then the curds are pressed into small shapes and left to dry in the open air. The result? A food that lasts forever, tastes like sour hay, and once cracked a scholar's tooth in Ulaanbaatar, and yet it's oddly comforting. You know exactly what you're eating. No preservatives, no flavorings, just the raw, preserved reality of milk, bacteria, and sun. The piece you're chewing now has probably seen more landscape than you have. Beside you, an elder offers a different kind of arowell, one sweetened slightly with wild berries. It's not worse. Still hard as regret, but with a fruity note that makes it taste less like punishment and more like a weirdly sincere granola bar. Some herders shape arowell into whimsical form, stars, moons, little animals. Others don't bother. Function trumps aesthetics in the steppe, and even the most lovingly molded cheese stars are destined to be gnawed into oblivion. Still, You appreciate the effort. You learn that some families keep secret Ariel molds passed down for generations. Not for status or art, but because the right mold dries the cheese more evenly. Tradition wrapped in practicality, just like everything else here. As the wind picks up, someone throws a handful of Arwell into a cloth pouch and ties it to the saddle. The pouch swings as the horse trots away, the cheese clacking gently like bones. That's lunch sorted for tomorrow. There's even a custom among young lovers. If you visit your sweetheart's gur, she may offer you a specially shaped arula, silent gift that says, I like you enough to share my crunchy dairy stones. Romantic, possibly, digestible, debatable. You chew through another bite, feeling the sourness bloom at the back of your mouth. It's sharp, but not offensive, like the ghost of yogurt arguing with a pebble. It's said that children in the steppe are given Arwell as soon as they can gum it, building both their jaw, strength, and immunity too. Everything you think about modern snacks wrapped in foil, machine-made, shelf-stable because of science. And then you look at this palm-sized curd rock, unchanged for centuries, drying on a yak hair string in the smoke of a fire. There's a quiet defiance to it, a message that says, we've been eating like this since before your ancestors knew what pasteurization was. There's even a half-joke among elders. If you lose a tooth to Arwell, it was a weak tooth anyway. The curd simply revealed the truth. One of the riders offers you a chunk from his personal stash. This one is older, he says, dried for 4 months on the roof during the hot season. It smells stronger, a little like hay left in the rain. You nibble cautiously. It's better, worse, impossible to tell. But you nod in approval, because that's what's expected. Across the fire, someone's boiling milk for tomorrow's batch. The bubbling pot fills the air with a sour-sweet fog that sticks to your clothes. You'll carry that smell for days, maybe longer. You find yourself oddly okay with that. It's not just food anymore. It's the rhythm of the steppe. Morning milking, noon sun-drying, evening chewing. Cheese, not as luxury, but as language. You lie back on the hard ground, cradling a warm stone for comfort. In your pocket is a single piece of Arwell, untouched, shaped like a crescent moon. You'll save it for the road, or for a friend, or maybe just as a souvenir, a quiet little fossil of survival, sour and strong. Above you, the stars wheel across the sky like tiny flakes of milk frozen in motion. Your jaw aches, your belly's full of things it doesn't understand, but your heart, its content. You wake to the sound of laughter and clinking ladles. The morning sun slips through a flap in the gear, spilling golden light onto a table covered in bowls of yogurt, steaming milk, and soft white curds. This isn't a battlefield breakfast, it's a domestic one, and you're about to experience the tender, dairy-filled heartbeat of Mongol life. You're in a family yurt now, away from the warriors and wind-burned riders. Here, cheese isn't hardened into rations or sealed like diplomatic treasure. It's fresh, living, and full of squeaks. Literally, the cheese on the table squeaks when you bite into it, like a little balloon of curd protesting its fate. The family calls it biaslag, a soft, fresh cheese made from cow or yak milk, lightly salted, sometimes served warm, and always shared. Historians still argue whether Mongol households refined this kind of cheese before or after their exposure to more settled agricultural neighbors. But what's clear is that this variety, the squeaky, soft stuff, is deeply loved, especially among grandmothers who trust it more than doctors. You're handed a small wooden bowl of Taraga fermented yogurt drink that tastes sharp but pleasant, like liquid cheese with opinions. It's chilled from overnight storage underground, where the family keeps it cool by storing it near the bones of last year's goat. You take a sip, it makes your eyes water. They laugh. The cheese-making here is a social activity. You watch as the grandmother ladles hot milk into a cloth pouch suspended from a wooden beam. She ties it off, sets a clay bowl underneath to catch the dripping whey, and announces that it will rest for several hours, rest, like it's a living thing. And, in a way, it is. You begin to see cheese not as an object, but a process, a living rhythm of milk to curd to nourishment. The children dart around the gur, stealing small pinches of curd and chasing each other with way-damp cloths. You're told the squeaky curds are best fresh within hours. After that, they can be dried, salted, or added to soups. You ask what happens to the leftover whey. The grandmother grins and hands you another bowl, this one filled with a sour, salty liquid that tastes like fermented lemonade. She calls it sharbus. You ask what it's for. She gestures vaguely to her knees and back, implying it's a cure-all. You nod solemnly and stop sipping immediately. In one corner of the yurt is a woven hanging pouch filled with a pale, pasty cheese. This is grim again, though here it's flavored with dried herbs, nettle, thyme, or sometimes garlic. Spread on flatbread, it becomes something deliciously close to what you might expect from a European farmhouse. You dare to ask if the grandmother has a secret recipe? She snorts. My secret is, I outlived 3 husbands. Cheese is simple. The sun rises higher, and more women arrive, carrying their own curds. This is what they call a curd circular gathering to exchange stories, gossip, and curd samples. Each brings a different style. One adds wild mint, another ferments her cheese in an old birch bowl for extra temps. A third proudly announces hers was made under a full moon, though no one seems to know if that helps or not. As you taste your way through each offering, you realize how much variation lives in this world of white foods. Mongol cuisine might seem repetitive at a glance: milk, curd, yogurt, repeat, but it's infinitely nuanced. Like dozens of snowflakes all born from the same storm, every cheese tells its own story. One woman brings a smoked curd. It's brown at the edges and tastes like campfire dreams. Another has cheese marbled with something green. You ask what it is. She says, it fell in from the roof. You decide not to press. There's even a cheese mint just for children, mild, crumbly, and shaped into tiny animals. A little goat, a horse, a turtle. The grandmother hands one to a toddler, who promptly eats the horse's head and laughs. You wonder if the shapes are meant to entertain or teach. Maybe both. Back outside, the sun is high, and the curds are being moved to dry on wooden planks. Some are stacked between stones, some hung from strings. You help for a while, turning each puck so it dries evenly. It feels sacred, like laying out family heirlooms under the sky. There's no hurry here, no timers, no thermometers. Cheese, like the day, unfolds slowly, in a quiet moment. One of the young women sits beside you, offering a piece of freshly dried biaslag. It's firmer now, salty, perfect with dried apricot. You ask what she'd do with it. She shrugs. Eat. Some, trade. Some, maybe offer to a traveler. You pause, cheese halfway to your mouth, and realize you are the traveler. And you've just been handed a piece of hospitality older than roads, older than recipes. You take a bite. It squeaks. Again. You laugh this time. Later, as the shadows stretch across the plains and the laughter quiets, you feel something settle in you, not the cheese, which is still navigating your intestines, but something gentler. A sense that the world, at least, here still runs on community, on patience, on milk turning slowly into meaning. You sit stiffly at a low, lacquered table, legs folded, surrounded by silk-robed officials whose eyebrows arch with every passing dish. You've made it to a Mongol-occupied court in northern China, and tonight's feast is an awkward collision of culinary traditions. On one side, you have delicately steamed dumplings. On the other, Mongol cheese. Lots of it. The room is quiet, save for the polite clink of porcelain. An elderly Confucian scholar eyes a plate of dried arrowwool as if it's a trap. You try to signal reassurance, but your mouth is full of chewy fermented goat curd, and your smile comes off as slightly panicked. This cultural dissonance is not just dinner, it's history unfolding on a plate. When the Mongols swept across China, they didn't just bring bows and horses, they brought cheese. And not just any cheese, but the full, pungent portfolio of fermented, sun-hardened, milk-derived survival snacks that made sense on the steppe, and absolutely none in a scholar's banquet hall. Historians still argue whether these dairy offerings were seen as crude necessities or proud symbols of Mongol identity. But we know this much: Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson and founder of the Yuan dynasty, proudly maintained steppe traditions in his new, very Chinese court. That meant yurts in the palace gardens, horse milk on the imperial table, and yezhis front and center. Tonight's platter is labeled simply as white delicacies. The Chinese hosts try to show courtesy. They nibble, they chew, they swallow eventually. One court poet discreetly sets his chunk of kurud on the edge of his plate and begins writing an ode to plum blossoms instead. But not everyone is put off. Some officials develop a taste for the foreign flavors, especially younger ones raised during the early years of Mongol rule. They add honey to the curds, soften them in soups, or crumble them into rice porridge. One even starts importing arag for medicinal purposes, claiming it cures melancholy. You suspect it causes it. The cheese, meanwhile, remains stubbornly Mongol. It's never quite tamed by the silken etiquette of Chinese banquets. It resists sauce. It ignores chopsticks. It arrives uninvited, unapologetic, and smells faintly of horses. You're offered another platter, this one containing what looks like slices of steamed curd, almost like tofu, but firmer and more threatening. You bite in. It's chewy, a bit sour, and strangely satisfying. Someone mutters that it was boiled in horse butter. You nod and do not ask for confirmation. In one corner, a visiting Mongol general laughs as he dunks a chunk of dried cheese into his tea, letting it soften before popping it in his mouth. The Chinese nobles stare in horror. The general shrugs. It's better this way, he says, slurping loudly. There's an unmistakable tension here. Cheese is no longer just food, it's a declaration. The Mongols might wear silk robes, sit on carved chairs, even quote Confucius when it suits them, but their roots, still firmly planted in fermented milk. You slip outside during a lull in the feast. In the courtyard, a servant boy carries a basket filled with leftover curds. He dumps them into a pot where they're mixed with herbs, possibly for medicine, or livestock feed, or possibly a prank. You ask what it's for, he says. For whoever is still hungry after that banquet. The boy grins and offers you a softer cheese from his pocket. You recognize it, a more refined version of biaslag, made with cow's milk and pressed into a bamboo mold. The texture is smoother, and it's lightly dusted with ground chrysanthemum petals. It's shockingly good. You wonder if this is the future of cheese in China hybrid form, one foot in the steppe, one in the garden, back in the hall. Someone is quoting poetry while holding a nugget of aruel like it's a precious gem. Another official suggests pairing the curd with rosewater. A chef nearby quietly takes notes. The empire is shifting not through conquest this time, but through cuisine. One record from this period notes that Mongol cheese was sometimes offered as tribute to Chinese emperors, alongside jade and rare birds. A bizarre combination. Unless you believe that power can be fermented, you return to your seat and find a new dish has arrived. Aruel soaked in hot plum wine. You try it. It's strange, sweet-sour, almost clever. You glance around and realize something odd: people are finishing their cheese. Not loving it, but finishing it. The ice is cracking, and like all things Mongol, it's cracking with persistence. Later, under the painted rafters of the guest hall, you lie on a silk mat with a full belly and a head spinning slightly from fermented everything. You realize something simple and slightly profound. Cheese doesn't always need to fit in. Sometimes it just needs to endure, and endure it has. Across steppes and palaces, in pouches, banquets, and side-eyes from Confucian scholars, you drift off with the sound of a spoon scraping the bottom of a curd bowl, and the faintest whisper of a horse snorting far beyond the palace gates. You arrive in Samarkand just as the heat begins to simmer off the stone streets like steam from a desert stew. Traders shout in a dozen languages. Spices, perfume, the air, cinnamon, cardamom, cloven. For a moment you forget all about cheese, until, of course, someone offers you a trade. He's a wiry man with a grin shaped by years of bargaining. His stall is stacked with bright pyramids of saffron, loops of dried figs, bolts of Persian silk, and one lonely pouch of ROL, sun-bleached and slightly cracked. He eyes your saddlebag and nods. "You Mongol?" he asks. You nod. Then, "You have cheese." You open your bag and reveal your rations, 2 pucks of hard grayish kurud, a soft square of fresh goat cheese wrapped in birch bark, and what might be dried curd soaked in horse sweat. The spice merchant lifts one piece to his nose, winces, then gestures toward a fistful of cinnamon sticks. It's a deal, and just like that, you've made your first cheese for spice trade, one that, according to some historians, might have been surprisingly common. As the Mongol Empire stretched along the Silk Road, cheese became a low-key bartering tool, passed between travelers, traders, and ambassadors, like a kind of pungent currency. Historians still argue whether these trades had any official economic structure, or were just the result of bored guards, swapping curds for something that didn't taste like saddle. But there are references in Persian and Arab texts that suggest Mongol dairy, specially dried cheese, was recognized, if not exactly celebrated, in many Silk Road cities. In Samarkand, though, the reception is mixed. Your cheese, once displayed proudly, now sits behind the merchant's spice stand, discreetly wrapped in cloth, as though it's embarrassed to be seen. He whispers that some customers think it's haunted butter. One woman demands to know if it's made from goat or demon. To soothe tempers, you unwrap a wedge of fresh biaslag and offer a sample. A few brave locals try it. One spits dramatically into a napkin. Another chews, shrugs, and asks if you have honey. Still, the idea takes root. A tea merchant suggests steeping arrowroll in boiling milk to soften it. A baker experiments with grating it over flatbread before toasting. Most of these experiments fail, but one young apprentice claims it cured his cough. Word spreads. Soon, there's mild interest from a nearby monastery, where the monks have a taste for strange fermented things. That night, as you camp beneath a pomegranate tree, your dinner consists of bread, dried apricots, and a chunk of your own ROL dipped in date syrup. It's unexpectedly delicious. For the first time, the cheese isn't fighting the flavors around its tits, collaborating. In the flickering firelight, you write a letter home, joking that cheese diplomacy has reached the spice capital. You imagine a future where Mongol curds become an actual trade item, perhaps packed neatly beside bundles of nutmeg, labeled "Step Delicacy Handle with Courage." There's something beautiful about the absurdity. Cheese from yaks and goats, made in windy tents, now passing hands in jewel-toned cities built on the bones of empires. The next morning, you see a boy carrying a small cloth pouch to the market. Inside, a piece of cheese he traded his lunch for. He says he's going to sell it for cinnamon, then trade that for tea. Then maybe, just maybe, a silken sash for his sister. That's the Silk Road in motion. Barter, bite, bargain. The cheese doesn't need to be loved. It only needs to travel. Back at the market, the merchant gives you a farewell gift, a small tin of cardamom, for your next cheese adventure. You tuck it away. Maybe you'll crumble it into your next batch. See what happens. Maybe it'll be terrible. But maybe it won't. There's a quiet lesson tucked between the spice racks. Not everything foreign needs to be perfect to be useful. Sometimes it just needs to be present, persistent, and slightly weird. You mount your horse and ride on your saddlebag a little lighter, your breath a little spicier. Behind you, in a stall filled with cloves and chili, a small wedge of aru waits patiently for its next journey. You've eaten things that would make a modern nutritionist cry, but today might be your greatest challenge yet. Camel milk yogurt chased with dried cheese, soaked in fermented horse sweat. You're not sure if this is a meal or a dare. You're deep in the steppe now, far from cities and trade posts. Here, the food is pure necessity, what keeps you alive when there's no forage, no firewood, and no plan. You squat beside a sun-blackened shepherd boiling something in a dented metal pot. He says it's gut-strengthening stew. You're pretty sure it's just whey, salt, and stubbornness. He hands you a ladle. You sip, your eyebrows try to escape your face. This isn't just food, it's a test of endurance. And yet, Mongols have thrived on it for centuries. Their stomachs are legendarily durable, capable of digesting raw mare's milk, days-old yogurt, and cheese that's been stored in animal hide under a saddle. It's said that a Mongol warrior could ride for days with nothing but a pouch of curds and emerge stronger than when he left. Historians still argue whether this gastrointestinal resilience came from genetics, lifestyle, or sheer exposure. Some propose that generations of living on dairy forged a gut microbiome capable of processing what would be considered biohazardous in the West. Others think the cheese itself, laden with wild bacteria, fermented in all sorts of unsupervised conditions, acted as an ongoing probiotic arms race. You, however, are losing. You lean against your horse and breathe through your nose. The cheese you ate was called Sagan Idi, part of the white foods category that includes all Mongol dairy staples. This particular one was aged in a felt-lined pouch, soaked in something they claimed was herbal tea, but which smelled suspiciously like the inside of a horse collar. It's said to increase stamina, boost digestion, and make your chest firm, like a stone. Your chest currently feels like a stone that's been hit with a larger stone nearby. A herder tells you a story about his grandfather, who once ate only cheese and fermented mare's milk for an entire winter. When spring came, he emerged with glowing skin and a second wife. You're not sure what part of that is cause and what's effect. Then someone offers you fermented camel yogurt. You consider running. It's thick, sour, and slightly fizzy. You take a sip. Your tongue curls like a frightened millipede. The others laugh. You're told it's good for fixing your heat. You don't know what your heat is, but it now has regrets. Despite your inner rebellion, you can't help but admire the logic. In a landscape of extremes, cold, wind, sand, endless sky, you need fuel that doesn't quit. Cheese, yogurt, and fermented milk are exactly that. Dense, durable, and oddly medicinal. They're not trying to be delicious. They're trying to keep you upright on a horse while the world freezes around you. Some Mongol warriors even carried dried cheese ground into powder to be mixed with water or tea for a quick protein drink. You try this version later and find it to be the consistency of wet cement with a personality. But it works. You feel full, alert, slightly haunted. There's even a game they play. Here children are given chunks of hard arul and challenged to see who can soften it the fastest by chewing alone. It builds patience and jaw muscles. You imagine Mongol dentists were either extremely skilled or completely unemployed. By nightfall, your stomach has settled into a truce. You sit by the fire with a young herder who shares his own personal mix. Goat cheese mashed with wild garlic and something crunchy that might be pine bark. It's surprisingly edible. You both dip dried meat in it and talk Mima. The stars, the wind, and the taste of spring milk versus autumn milk. Spring wins. You're told that cheese made from spring milk is lighter, more fragrant, and often reserved for honored guests. Autumn cheese is denser, heavier, better for storage. This seasonal difference is rarely written down but universally known. It's like a calendar you can taste. Before bed, someone offers you a strange dessert, slag, mixed with ground sugar and frozen berries. It's cold, sour sweet, and actually, lovely. You savor it slowly, each bite a small victory. Lying down in the grass, you feel your body humming not from comfort, but from function. The food didn't coddle you. It didn't beg for praise. It just did its job. It fueled the ride, the laughter, the stories. It made the cold tolerable, the silence warmer, and somewhere inside you, among the herbs and curds and fizzing microbes, a new resilience begins to grow, strange, fermented, and quietly unshakable. The morning mist rolls low across the grasslands as you ride alongside a caravan of pilgrims, Buddhists, Muslims, and shamans alike hauled, bound for a sacred festival on the steppe. They carry prayer flags, carved talismans, and bundles of cheese. Of course, even faith, it seems, has a dairy component out here. You follow the caravan to a wide clearing ringed with yurts. The smoke of cooking fires rises into the sky in lazy spirals, and the air smells of milk, incense, and horses. People greet one another with hugs, with blessings, and with cheese. Hard curds are pressed into your palm like coins. One woman tucks a soft pouch of grim into your coat with a nod and a whisper, "Good for dreams." This is no ordinary gathering. Here, spiritual devotion and dairy converge. Cheese is not just sustenance. It's offering, it's memory. It's a quiet bridge between the earth and whatever might lie beyond it. You watch as a Buddhist monk in crimson robes blesses a bowl of fresh curds, spinning a prayer wheel in one hand and stirring with the other. He sets the bowl beside a small altar of candles and yak hair strands. Later, someone will eat it not for taste, but for grace. Historians still argue whether the Mongol integration of cheese into religious rituals was original or inherited from earlier nomadic traditions. Some claim it originated with shamanic sky offerings, where fermented milk was left on high rocks as a gift to the spirits. Others believe it was simply practical. If you're praying for good health, why not include the food that's kept your people alive for generations? Nearby, a group of Sufi mystics prepares a communal meal. The centerpiece is a thick soup made from dried curds, barley, and wild herbs, stirred with rhythmic chanting. You're handed a bowl. It's warm, deeply sour, but rich in a way that feels grounding. As you eat, they tell you the curd is aged with prayer. You don't ask how they can tell. Later, a shaman leads a quiet ceremony beneath an old cedar tree. He burns horsehair and pours a ladle of fermented milk into the fire. The smell is sharp and strange, but no one flinches. You're told the spirits of the land prefer milk to blood. It's a gentler kind of sacrifice, one that nourishes without harm. In the crowd, children hand out small cheese figurines shaped like animals, goats, horses, birds. They're meant to carry prayers when eaten. You watch a little girl nibble a cheese crane and whisper something before swallowing. Her mother smiles and ties a blue ribbon in her hair. You begin to understand. In this world, dairy isn't divided into sacred and mundane. It simply is woven into every layer of life. From breakfast to burial, a wrinkled old man sits beside a smoky fire, sipping tea steeped with curds. He says, in a voice like dry wind, "Milk is the beginning. Cheese is what we remember." You spend the afternoon wandering the camp, sampling cheese from every corner. Some are sharp and smoky, others are soft and sweet, wrapped in edible leaves or tied with silk string. One smells so strongly of juniper, you expect it to burst into flame. There's debate in one tent over whether to use goat milk or mare's milk in a ceremonial curd stew. An elder insists goat milk is purer. A younger woman says mare's milk brings dreams of fast horses. They settle it by making both and eating both. You pass a yurt where women are chanting softly while stirring a vat of curds. You ask what they're singing. One says, A song for safe travels. Another adds, and to keep the cheese from sticking. It's impossible to tell where the ritual ends and the recipe begins. As night falls, a wide circle of people gathers under the stars. A low, droning throat chant rises from the center. A monk sprinkles dried curd dust into the fire, creating sudden sparks of light. Someone passes around a dish of lightly fried biaslag, served with rosehip jam. You take a bite. It's warm, floral, and just a little sour. You close your eyes, listening to the chant, feeling the heat of the fire, the weight of the cheese in your mouth, the silence between the stars. Here, in the vast openness of the steppe, cheese is not just food, it's a hymn, a history, a humble offering that survives, transforms, and connects. You lie down on a woven mat, full in body and spirit. A prayer flag flutters nearby. In your coat pocket, the little pouch of grim feels warm against your chest. Somewhere in the distance, a horse snorts. Someone laughs. A spoon scrapes the bottom of a curd pot, and you drift off, cradled by wind, wool, and the ancient comfort of fermented milk. You wake in a modern Mongolian market, blinking against neon signs and the smell of fried dough. The old ways are quieter now, woven into plastic bins and scrawled labels. But if you know where to look hand today, you'll find the ghosts of empire clinging to cheese. Your boots echo on cracked linoleum as you wander between stalls, past hawkers shouting prices and schoolchildren munching snacks that 1,000 years ago would have been battlefield rations. You pause beside a folding table stacked with vacuum-sealed bricks. One is labeled Arl, but it looks too perfect, too uniform, like cheese that's been tamed. You ask the vendor if it's authentic. She raises an eyebrow and pulls a cloth from beneath the table. There, in a faded pouch, is the real thing, hand-shaped, sun-dried curd, cracked and imperfect, dusted with something that might be horsehair or just time. You recognize it instantly. The old ways haven't died, they've just gone undercover. She lets you taste a piece. It's sharp, powdery, and somehow nostalgic. You feel the wind of the steppe in your lungs again, the jostle of the saddle, the laughter of herders brewing tea beside a smoky fire. You buy 2 pouches, not because you're hungry, but because some things deserve to be carried. Historians still argue whether these modern markets represent continuity or some worry that industrial packaging will erase centuries of oral knowledge. Others say the heart of the cheese, the hands that make it, the milk that sours in its own time, remains untouched. You follow a narrow alley to a butcher's stall, where beneath the hanging meats sits a box labeled Only White Treasure. The vendor, half asleep, nods when you gesture. He lifts the lid. Inside, tucked in cloth, are strange old lumps, some crumbly, others waxy, all smelling faintly of smoke and hay. Very old, he says. Maybe grandmother's grandmother's recipe. We keep for special days. You ask if anyone still knows how they were made. He shrugs. Some, not many. But when you eat, you remember. He offers you a piece dense, slightly sweet, and definitely alive with microbes. Back outside, you pass a group of teenagers eating convenience store cheese snacks in bright foil wrappers. One sees your paper pouch and grins. Ancient stuff, she says, in English. My grandma chews it when her knees hurt. She says it like a joke, but you see the respect in her eyes. Not far away, a festival is starting. Riders in traditional dress thunder past on horses, faces solemn, coats embroidered, with symbols of sun and milk. A small yurt has been set up as an exhibit, a living museum. Inside, women press fresh curds into molds carved with step patterns, just as their ancestors did. Children dart between them, snatching soft cheese and laughing. You sit for a while, on a bench beside the yurt, unwrapping your arul. The flavor is old, older than memory, older than maps. It crunches like frost, sours like history, and warms like fire. In the distance, Loudspeakers play pop music. A drone buzzes overhead, filming the riders. But here, beneath the yurt's curved beams, the world turns slowly. Just milk, heat, time, and the refusal to vanish. Because cheese, it turns out, is stubborn. It resists weather, reason, and reinvention. And so do the people who make it. You eat the last bite as the sky begins to darken, and for a moment, the city noise fades. You're back in the saddle, wind in your face, a goatskin bag slapping against your leg, the slow churn of a journey measured in hoofbeats and hunger. The cheese remains quiet, unpretentious, immortal. So now, with your belly full and your mind heavy with curds and stories, let yourself soften into the night. The wind that once whipped across the Mongol plains now whispers just outside your window, gentler, perhaps, but still carrying echoes. Imagine the faint creak of leather saddles, the rustle of felt yurts, the steady sound of milk being ladled into waiting pots. Picture the quiet hands of elders shaping curds, not for profit, not for prestige, but because it was time, because the herd had given, and nothing must be wasted. Let those images settle around you like a warm woolen blanket. Children chasing, curd stars in the dust, old women muttering to fermenting cheese as if it might answer. Campfires flickering as hardened riders dissolve ROL between cracked teeth. You're not riding anymore. You're resting, no need to chew, to barter, to wonder whether what you've just eaten is still technically dairy. The day is over. The cheese has done its work. Breathe in, slowly let the scent of earth and smoke and slightly sour milk drift past. Let your body go quiet, heavy, gentle. You're far from the empire now, but some small part of it lingers in your dreams, in your gut, and maybe, if you're lucky, in the fridge tomorrow. Close your eyes, drift, float like milk warming in a bowl. The fire's gone low, the curds have set, and the night is yours. End of script. Sweet dreams.